Mr. Speaker, I will remind him about other victims who came to me who I did help. The victims of the Tavistock scandal who came to me as a minister. I didn't send them away like his safeguarding minister. This issue, I've raised it in speeches, I've raised it publicly. He knows that as a minister, I would not have been speaking on this specific issue. I was not a Home Office minister.
Keir Starmer's face turned ashen as the Prime Minister unleashed a blistering attack on Labour's handling of the grooming gang crisis. The chamber fell silent, all eyes fixed on the opposition leader. In that moment, it became clear that this wasn't just another political skirmish. The gravity of the accusations and the pain of the victims hung heavy in the air. What would Starmer say to defend his party's actions?
It has been involving local and national officials, the police, prosecutors, and politicians. He talks about some of the local inquiries, but these interlinked issues cannot be covered by local inquiries alone. That we launched the CAS review, which even his health secretary has accepted. So we do right by victims, Mr. Speaker. The reason why a national inquiry is important is because this issue is systemic. In fact, the leaders of the Manchester inquiry resigned because they couldn't get evidence, they couldn't summon witnesses, and not a single person in a position of authority has been held to account.
As the Prime Minister launched into a scathing critique of Labour's handling of the grooming gang crisis, Keir Starmer's usually composed demeanor began to crack. The opposition leader's face told a story his words couldn't hide, revealing the depths of Labour's discomfort with this festering wound in British politics. For years, the Labour Party has danced an uncomfortable waltz with denial when it comes to addressing the grooming gang issue head-on.
This is an important issue, and we have to focus on the victims and survivors, and it isn't helpful. This sort of lies and misinformation and slinging of mud doesn't help them one bit.
The Prime Minister called for 9 inquiries in the last Parliament. Does he not see that by resisting this one, people will start to worry about a cover-up?
Doesn't help one bit. Mr. Speaker, she raised a question of a victim with me, and quite right to, and I accept that victims and survivors are in different places on this.
A party that claims to champion social justice has shown a puzzling reluctance to confront this horrific abuse. But why? The answer lies in a tangled web of political correctness, institutional failings, and a fear of confronting uncomfortable truths. Starmer's past as Director of Public Prosecutions from 2008 to 2013 has come under intense scrutiny. During his tenure, critics argue that crucial opportunities were missed to address the systemic issues that allowed grooming gangs to proliferate. The Rochdale scandal, in particular, cast a long shadow over Starmer's leadership, raising questions about the efficacy of the prosecution process under his watch. Perhaps most damning is Starmer's own admission that vulnerable girls were let down during his time in charge. In one particularly egregious case, a prosecution against a rape suspect was dropped despite overwhelming evidence. This failure highlights a critical breakdown in the system designed to protect the most vulnerable members of society. But the rot goes deeper than individual failings. A pervasive fear of being labeled racist or Islamophobic created a chilling effect within law enforcement and prosecutorial circles. This fear acted as a major barrier to justice, allowing perpetrators to operate with impunity while their victims suffered in silence. The political climate during Starmer's leadership was marked by a reluctance to confront these uncomfortable truths, with reports indicating that inquiries into the matter have led absolutely nowhere and wasted millions in the process. As pressure mounts for a national inquiry into grooming gangs, Labour finds itself caught between a rock and a hard place. Critics argue that local inquiries are woefully insufficient to address the systemic failures that allowed such abuse to occur over decades. Only a statutory public inquiry, they insist, can adequately encompass the national nature of these crimes and provide the answers and justice that victims deserve. Watching Starmer squirm under the weight of these accusations during PMQs is a telling sight. His body language betrays a deep discomfort, suggesting a crisis within Labour that goes beyond mere political posturing. As he fumbles for responses, lacking his usual confidence, the pressure on the party becomes palpable. As the political storm rages over Labour's handling of the grooming gang scandal, one notable figure has fallen conspicuously silent. Jess Phillips, the Shadow Minister for Domestic Violence and Safeguarding, known for her vocal advocacy and fiery speeches, now finds herself caught in a web of conflicting loyalties and mounting criticism. Phillips, a self-proclaimed feminist and champion of women's rights, faces an impossible dilemma. How can she reconcile her party's stance with the horrific abuse suffered by thousands of young girls? Her uncharacteristic silence speaks volumes, leaving many to wonder if political expediency has trumped her usual passion for justice. The controversy surrounding Phillips deepened when it came to light that she had taken over 3 months to respond to Oldham Council's request for an inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. This delay left survivors feeling distressed and frustrated, questioning the urgency with which Labour was addressing the ongoing issues of child sexual exploitation. But it was Phillips's outright rejection of calls for a Home Office-led inquiry that truly ignited public outrage. In a move that shocked many, she insisted that the investigation should be handled by local authorities rather than the government. This decision left survivors and victims groups feeling betrayed and dismissed. One can't help but wonder, is this the same Jess Phillips who has built her reputation on speaking truth to power and standing up for the vulnerable? Her letter to Oldham Council maintaining that the council should lead the inquiry has been viewed by many survivors as a dismissal of their concerns and a failure to take responsibility at the national level. Critics argue that Phillips's stance undermines the urgency of addressing the systemic failures that allowed abuse to occur over decades. Victims groups have emphasized the need for government intervention, citing a lack of trust in local authorities. Their calls for a statutory public inquiry to address the national nature of these crimes have fallen on deaf ears within Labour's ranks. As pressure mounts from within the party and from victims' advocacy groups, Phillips's silence becomes increasingly deafening. Her refusal to support a national inquiry has drawn criticism not only from opposition parties, but also from within Labour itself. Some members are calling for a more robust response to the grooming gang crisis, suggesting that Phillips's position may be seen as a betrayal of the very victims she claims to support. The political maneuvering surrounding this issue raises uncomfortable questions about the role of political correctness in hindering investigations into grooming gangs. Labour's response, exemplified by Phillips's stance, seems to prioritize political considerations over the needs of survivors and the pursuit of justice. The Labour Party's handling of the grooming gang scandal has left them in a precarious position, with public opinion turning against their reluctance to address the issue head-on. Recent polling paints a damning picture, revealing that a significant portion of the British public believes a national inquiry is not just necessary, but crucial to tackling the systemic issues surrounding these heinous crimes. This groundswell of public sentiment is putting immense pressure on Labour's leadership, forcing them to confront a dark chapter in British history that they've long tried to sidestep. Survivors of these horrific abuses have been vocal in their distress over Labour's delayed response to calls for a thorough investigation. Their pain and frustration are palpable, serving as a stark reminder of the human cost of political inaction. As the clamor for justice grows louder, Keir Starmer and his colleagues find themselves at a crossroads. Will they continue down the path of denial, or will they finally muster the courage to face the truth? The victims deserve nothing less than full transparency and accountability. The ball is in Labour's court, but their recent squirming suggests they may not be up to the challenge.